Hey there, human mookers. We're here to chat with some really good friends from the second time the human mook ran, and I'm so excited to have the opportunity to chat with Daniel and with Helen, and everybody knows Maha, and really kind of kick off the conversation around what they learned last time. But let's start with some brief introductions. Maha, why don't we turn to you, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go to Helen and Daniel.
Okay, I'm a PhD student at George Mason University in Virginia, USA, and this is my second time facilitating this MOOC with Whitney, and this time around we have two other facilitators, Matt and Patricia, and I'm just excited to be part of this again.
And I'm Helen DeWaard. I'm an instructor at a university in Central Ontario. This is my second opportunity to work within a more humanized environment for my own learning and for my own instructional practice. So I'm happy to be here.
My name is Daniel Clark. I'm head of online programs at BPP University in the UK. I've been working in the field of online education about the last 6 years, and I've also been an online student. Again, studied human MOOC last time around, and thought it was really good.
All right, thank you so much. And I forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Whitney Kilgore, a PhD candidate at the University of North Texas, and have had the pleasure of being a part of this Humanizing Online Instruction course that we've run. It'll be starting for the third time tomorrow, and really excited to have the opportunity to work with Maha and Patrice and Matt on this iteration of it, and so excited to talk to Helen and Daniel today and hear more about what they learned, what other people can expect to learn from this little learning journey, and what some of the impacts to practice are and takeaways. But with that, maybe we can just start. Maha, if you don't mind, I'm dying to get Helen to tell us the story about what she thought it was going to be going into it, and what that learning experience ended up being for her.
Helen?
Well, I wasn't sure what I was getting into. I had some experience with the kind of the sense of communities of practice, community of inquiry approach. I'd done some reading because it's a Canadian, I guess, push, but getting into it, I really didn't know. I was very uncomfortable at the beginning of the whole experience, and ended up just diving in and really enjoying it, making the connections, I think, more for my own practice than the connections to people, but the connections to people happened just as I was doing stuff.
And I remember Daniel also talking about that he didn't expect to actually complete everything or complete the MOOC in one of his blog posts. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I count myself as a bit of a MOOC skeptic overall, as I think many of us are, and that's a whole other debate, right? But I've started a couple of MOOCs and really not got very far with them at all. They really seem to me to be sort of some talking heads and a bit of discussion forum, and just not great. Not something I really felt was worth investing my time in. So, but I'm always interested in trying out new things, and trying out this one, I actually ended up completing, whatever that means in MOOC context, but I kind of got through to the end of the course, and it's partly because it was structured just very differently. It is more of a, I guess, to use the George Siemens terminology, it's more of a connectivist MOOC. It's not really an ex-MOOC, but I was actually the whole community of inquiry model was actually new to me, which as I blogged about, I think having worked in the field as long as I have, that's my bad, but I found that really interesting to learn about that and understand that, and to make the connections. I mean, for me personally, it was a real chance to kind of reinvigorate my blogging, which I'd done previously when I did a master's in online education, and then I'd done the occasional posts, and this really gave me a kind of hook to start blogging again, and then that led to other interactions and just generally a more interesting and more worthwhile experience.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that, Daniel. So I guess my question, kind of piggybacking on that comment, is, do you feel that you got more out of the connections you made inside the course in Canvas, or that by being so open and blogging openly and tweeting and exploring those open spaces, that allowed you the opportunity to be more connected to others?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the latter. I think it was the kind of doing stuff on social media. For me, helped a lot with the connections. I mean, I've also, one of the other things I experienced in the last few months was doing Rhizo for the first time, and of course that's completely, just go ahead and do stuff, So I guess that approach worked quite well for me, and I don't know, I did some of the video discussion stuff. I didn't do a lot on the discussion forums. I just found the sort of discussions we had on Twitter and social media kind of just worked a bit better. But there's definitely a place for both.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, Danielle. Yeah. It was, for me, it was trying to balance both, and I really tried to kind of participate in both the open and the Canvas spaces. And I ended up pulling stuff from the Canvas space into some of the open spaces just so that I'd have it after the course was done. So I ended up structuring a website, a web page in a couple of places just so that I'd be able to capture what I was learning through the process and not losing it at the end of the Canvas when it closed.
Although putting the stuff on YouTube worked really well, sorry, because I know the discussions you had, so most people go on YouTube, and actually a special mention for the Jim Groom one last time round, which I thought was fantastic, where he talked about Dr. Oblivion and all that stuff, and I've actually used that in my teaching since as an illustration of how how to do jolts to students and stuff like that. So that's been really really valuable.
Yeah, I think I wasn't a student. Well, I was learning in the MOOC, but I wasn't a participant as in learning as a student in the Human MOOC. But still, I felt like, even though I was engaged in the discussions with other people, but once the course stopped, those connections were lost if those other participants weren't on social media. So with Daniel, with Helen, we stayed in touch, through Twitter, and we would talk, and I got to know more about their work and what they do. While with other people, we just lost that connection because there was no longer a Canvas. So.
Well, and you're bringing up a good point. So Maha, I was involved in one of George's first MOOCs in 2008, I think it was. CCK, I think, was the first one I did, and I remember the takeaway of those connections really helping me feel like I grew as a person, and that's what really drove me to write about my evolution as, going from truly a young child behaviorist learner to more of a maybe social constructivist learner in schools. But then now as a PhD student, candidate, what have you, I feel much more like a connectivist learner. Like, it is the power of the connections I make and the research we could do together or the conversations we can have that drive my own understanding of any topic. It doesn't matter what it is. I can reach out to someone and talk to them about it. And that's really kind of what pulled me into this connectivist world. But I think that as we look at dual layer, which Matt and George talked about a little bit, we do have to have that safe space for those who aren't ready to make that transition from social constructivist to connectivist. And so that's why we have that Canvas space for those folks.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I was very interested in this dual layer. Even after the Open Ed conference in Vancouver, I was doing all these virtual connecting sessions, but the whole idea of, having that safe space, that enclosed, secure, whatever it is, and then that open forum, I'm very aware of that for my own students, and knowing that some of them they're just not ready to put their persona out in open spaces, and giving them a safe place and a safe sort of sandbox space that they can explore some of those open spaces. And I think that's one of the things Human MOOC taught me, is that you have to be ready to step outside of the sandbox in some way.
Yeah, and I want to take just a second to introduce Cathy, who's just joined us. And then I want to come back to your thought, Helen. So Cathy was with us during the very first Human MOOC, came back and spent some time with us last time, so this makes her a triple timer. So I'm so glad you could join. And Cathy had a really unique experience that I want to come back to, but I want to piggyback on Helen's point. Is that okay, Cathy?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Helen, one of the things I think that I have learned being just engaging with other women that I know that have had things happen in their life that don't allow them to participate on social media and in social spaces because they don't feel safe there. I think that your point about creating that safe closed space where they can share with their classmates and colleagues and we don't push them, we create an alternative assignment. So I'm all about social media and education. I think the connections we make, these connectivist connections, are amazing, but I do think we still have to have an alternative assignment that allows people to share their thoughts privately.
Yeah, very much so. And you know, giving like the dual layers with this Human MOOC is really neat because if you're ready to do it, you've got that opportunity to go for it. And for my students, if they're ready to get onto Twitter, then I'm right there and I'm you know, tweeting to them and with them. I have a student out on placement right now who's sending tweets to me on a consistent basis, and it's so exciting to see that. But not all the students are ready for that. And I don't expect them to be.
And they're very symbiotic. I mean, you know, I don't think these are alternatives, and actually they kind of work the other way around as well. Because you know, so when I started blogging, I was studying with the Open University, and that kind of gave me a ready-made community to blog into and to kind of get established with that. Whereas, to be honest, otherwise, if I just would be talking to a vacuum, no one would even know I was there. So I feel like that community really helped me get started. And you know, part of the reason why the blogging works doing Human MOOC is because again, you're blogging into this community that is interested in what you're doing. And so I think the two they're not alternatives. They very much work together, and you kind of shift from one to the other, you know, as it suits you, basically.
And I like that term symbiotic because I often think of the course as much like a cell, but with like a semi-permeable membrane, right? So you can go and hang out outside the cell, or you can stay inside in your protective bubble.
Yeah.
So Cathy, I'm so glad you were able to join us, and I appreciate you running as fast as you did to be able to make it. I wonder if you could explain your story. You've told it to me before, but your story about what Human MOOC meant for you the first time we taught it, or we were in it together.
When I first encountered Human MOOC, it was through a webinar that Michelle Pacansky-Brock had given, and she kind of was plugging it, and it just so happened at that very time I was in a class on leadership and online education, and the professor disappeared. He was not responding to our inquiries. He was not grading things. He was not communicating with us in any way. And we, as students, had to decide what we were going to do about it. And we just really stuck together and made decisions about how we were going to work things out. And it worked out. It just proved to me the value of the Human MOOC course and what we were going through. When we were finished, of course, we had already talked to somebody about this situation, but I really pushed the Human MOOC principles that I had learned through this course with my other professors.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I'm taking a course actually, and it's a face-to-face course, and we're still having the same issue. Like, it's been a struggle. We don't get responses to emails. Like, it would take them 2 weeks to respond, and it's not an online course. It's a face-to-face course, but still, that human, presence is just missing. So I think we still have a lot to learn about the human presence and even in the classroom.
Oh, absolutely. That sounds crazy.
Yeah, it does.
So Impact to practice. So we had a little chat before we went live, and I know Helen has a really good story to share. One of the things that when we're in it, when we're in the course and we're talking with people and they're sharing some of their concerns or aha moments as they go along, that's great. But I often wonder, how is this impacting the classroom? You know, is there a takeaway? Does it change thinking, or does it at least allow you to have that voice in the back of your head that makes you continually think differently? So Helen, maybe you could share an impact to practice story.
A big one for me was the kind of the push in Human MOOC to do instructor video and putting your face, you know, in an online space. And the more I pushed myself to do it, the more comfortable I've become, you know, having these conversations. But having those conversations with my students, I said I teach face-to-face, and I'm about to start an online course as well. But putting my face to feedback, for example, was a big push for me. And in the spring, I provided individual feedback to students' assignments, and I've just redone that with a course that I'm just wrapping up now. And one of my students in the face-to-face mentioned how valuable the feedback video was. She's been watching it over and over again just to make sure that she's addressing in the assignment everything that I mentioned, you know, that she could consider tweaking or consider doing, or you know, things that could be improved in some way. So just that was for me the impact of the video, putting my face out there on video, and using video to support student learning.
Yeah, I think I remember your post. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I remember your post very early in the course last time where it said, "You've pushed me way outside my comfort zone," or something to that effect.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one I did on just recording video, and things that I've noticed when people are recording video for whatever purpose, and yeah, some insights that I gained on that.
Yeah. Daniel, what were your takeaways?
I mean, I think there were several. I mean, sort of from the more academic side, I think getting your head around that the model was really useful. I would echo part of what Helen said about the use of video, which I think it's a good image about having this in the back of your head, saying, well, actually, video is very powerful, and consider using it. And there's one online course that I've been teaching on where we've actually a colleague and I have recorded our introductions as a video discussion using video technology, and that was actually fairly straightforward for us because we worked together on this, and we could just sort of have a discussion about the concepts within the course, but doing it as a video did make it much more real. And actually, I noticed now on Turnitin, which certainly we use a lot in the UK, I don't know if it's so widely used in the US, you can record audio feedback just as very routinely on assignments, and where I've seen that used, I think it's really effective. It's a lot more, for all the reasons we know, it's a lot better sort of form of communication than just writing text. So I think, yeah, I'd agree with Helen. It sort of it sort of pushed me that way. I mean, it obviously pushed to the social media stuff as well, kind of pushed me further down that road too, but that's something I haven't managed to convince most of my students to do. There's a course I'm teaching at the moment it's actually for our tutors, and it's about student learning, and I bring in a bit about how technology is changing it, and I kind of give them all the reasons why they should really go and blog, and this is a really good tool, and I've had one person who started a blog as a result of it, so great for her. That is something, but it still seems to be a very sort of minority pursuit.
And it's a lot of work.
It is.
Cathy, any impacts to practice that you could share? Any takeaways that you've employed?
Well, unfortunately, I finished my master's in May, but unfortunately, I haven't had an opportunity to teach yet. I'm still working in marketing, but I think one of the things that I have taken away and used in my marketing is I've been able to convince some of my colleagues the value of social media when it comes to marketing. Those people that don't understand that there is a human touch available when you speak on Twitter or you speak on Facebook, that when you respond to somebody directly, a question that they've asked, you're making a big impact on them. So, you know, in terms of, I try to talk to other my colleagues that are teaching and see what they're doing. But I agree with Robin, and I'm Helen, and then I'm not sure I had the other the gentleman's name, but Daniel. Since I came in late, video and audio make a huge difference when I was in my final courses from my professors.
It's interesting when you see the feedback written on a paper, how quickly you can internalize that as being negative.
Yeah.
I know for me personally, and I can't obviously speak for others, but for me personally, I would often take that feedback, and it would cause like paralysis. I would have to spend several days, weeks, depending how long the project was and how many hours I put into it, getting over the wording of the feedback or what I interpreted it to mean. And when I can hear the voice of the caring individual who wants me to get better, sharing that valuable feedback and input, the value of it, the human voice and the value of that feedback changes because I can hear their intent. I think that it's deeply powerful. So.
I think one of the other factors that really, you know, humanized it for me was always remembering who it is that I'm giving the feedback to, and always trying to put a face to it and say, you know, and ultimately it's not about you, but it's about the work. So it's you know, divesting it's the work we're talking about. It's not about you. You're a bad student, or you're a bad blogger, or you're a bad tweeter, or any of that. You're a bad teacher. Let's look at the work and let's make that what this is about.
That's what I do with my kids. So I just you remember, guys? You know, I did my research last time on the Human MOOC, and I looked into self-regulated learning and all that, and it was interesting when we got the data back and looked at it. The main problem with most people, even those who actually completed all the activities and you know, and reached you know, whatever their goal was in the Human MOOC, still time management was a huge issue for them. And we all have busy lives, but since you guys were one of those very active participants, and we're going to start tomorrow, and I think it would be helpful to, you know, kind of give our new participants some suggestions or strategies that they can use to kind of help them. So, how did you do it?
I think one of the things I would say is, you know, don't feel you have to do everything. I mean, you say I completed all the activities. I'm not sure there is sort of all of them ticked off. But you know, I kind of went through the whole course and kind of covered what I wanted to cover out of the course. And I think that's the important thing, because certainly what I see a lot with my students is, you know, some of them just feel like they have to do everything on the list, and if they don't do everything it's very easy to get behind, and then you think, oh, forget it, you know, and then you drop out and you don't get the rest of the benefits. So, you know, the things like this you do for your benefit. You're not doing it for credit or for anything like that. So it's a matter of kind of just being thoughtful about, you know, what is it I really want to get out of this, and therefore what am I going to focus on, and what activities am I going to make sure that I complete.
And for me, I really focused on what was it that would apply for me to my instructional practice with students. I really wanted to pick up new things and new activities or new ideas that I could then take away and put into practice. And again, like Daniel said, you have to pick and choose. You find your own path. And for me, it was I was going to collect. I wanted to collect as much as I could. So I became a curator, an avid curator, and used my blog as a way to sift through what I was curating. So those were the two strategies I used. through the 4 weeks. I loved having the week 0 onboarding activity. That was new for me, and I've used that for my own practice, so that you don't feel like you've got to get going on everything all at once. You've got that week to sift through and figure out where you want to go and what you want to do. So that's good. Take the time to do that.
And as with all these things, and you know, this is part of social presence, right? So it's part of what's built into the model. But the more you can interact, and recognizing that, you know, we don't have a lot of time, and you know, there's going to be a limit to it. But the more of that you can do, the more motivating that is, and the more likely you are to persist.
I think if everybody looks at the opportunities they have to take one thing away, at least from each week, and put into practice, or to really think about and work on as a goal, that's the value is right there. You don't need to have every activity completed.
Good tips and advice. We have 2 questions that came in, and I want to be responsive to those people who are interested in asking questions during all of the Google Hangouts during the course. We hear you, and we want to answer your questions, so keep them coming. Brian asks, I wonder how FERPA applies to our MOOCs, and I'm happy to jump in and just kind of, because we've got a very diverse audience here, right? So we've got the UK, we've got Canada representative, and some US. But FERPA applies when you're in an institution of higher education in the US. And this particular MOOC happens outside of an institution. So I think in this case, I can only say that FERPA doesn't necessarily apply. Anybody have a different opinion? Okay, here's the big question, and this is the one that I think we're going to spend the next 3 minutes on probably. How do cultural differences affect human communication in an online setting? And I think we've all had some pretty interesting experiences over the last year or so since the first human MOOC, so it would be fun to hear each of your opinions on cultural differences.
I'm going to jump in because I've had some experiences now with, people connecting with people from a wide variety of places around the world. And I think the one thing that I've learned is to sit and listen, and to think before you tweet or talk or respond. Reflect on what it is you think, and if you're not sure, ask personal, private, do it, connect personally as opposed to publicly, to see if you can't clarify if there's something that's really bugging you or what you're wondering about.
I mean, I guess I experienced this a bit. I mean, I don't know if Maha will correct me on this, but I felt a lot of the time like I was the only British participant on Human MOOC last time. And I have, as it happens, I have worked a lot with Americans in my career, so I'm kind of used to the way you guys do things. But what I did find very interesting about the whole thing is that the way online education is approached is quite different. In the US and in the UK, I mean, you have this profession of instructional designer, which is fairly highly developed and fairly high, defined, and we just don't really have that, or we have that in very different forms here. It tends to be much less sort of I don't know, less prescribed, I guess. So there is a very different perspective on it. But I mean, like Helen said, I think you learn from that. I think you approach it in the spirit of I'm interested in the way other people do it, and then I'm sure I can learn something from it. So it just comes down to being respectful, really.
I think I learned even in my my capstone project for my master's, there were a couple of people out of country during that time, and to learn how to help them as a fellow student would be the same as helping as an instructor to really get down, like I think Helen said, to understand and think very carefully before you speak, and even if you're trying to help, to try to understand where they're coming from, whether it's a language difference or an interpretation difference that comes out of that. You have to really be respectful of the other culture.
Yeah, and with that, I would say that that's one of the things that I found just from being a part of this course is that the voice and video components and having an opportunity to talk with people live has really helped, or even asynchronously when the video is recorded and posted, has helped me understand the cultural differences that I may not have picked up on if they had typed in the discussion forum. I may not have known that they were a non-native English speaker. And something that simple, if I understand that, then I can relate a little differently and a little better. So, so hopefully those video elements are helping us to really understand people and, like you said, speak first to understand, right? So with that, we're at the end of our half hour, but we are so excited to be kicking off the third iteration of the Human MOOC. It starts tomorrow, Monday, December the 7th in the U.S. around noontime, so that means all my Australian friends won't be able to access the course until about Tuesday morning. We did have an announcement go out saying the course was open yesterday, but that was because we were all so excited that we tried to force it open, and it wouldn't.
all four of us were trying to open it, but it won't.
So we really tried to start early because we were getting very excited as a team to get going on things yesterday. So we had a couple of people who saw that and were disappointed they couldn't access the course, but it will open tomorrow.
Sure.
The folks at the Canvas Open Network have been just fabulous to work with, and it is set to open tomorrow. So we look forward to getting to know each of the participants in the course again this time. Maha, Matt, Patrice, and I will be on the discussion forums. We hope to see Cathy, Daniel, and Helen in there too. We chatted briefly about a Human MOOC alumni badge before we came online. I do think
those badges, huh?
Yeah, we've got people coming back. We're going to have to invent another badge. So we look forward to getting to know all you guys tomorrow.
Okay, Whitney, just before we say goodbye, I want to apologize to Patrice for mispronouncing her name. I have a note right here. I had the note, so yeah, it's just on record now.
Very human of you, Maha. Good job. We all make mistakes. We are all human. But let's go make some mistakes together, and some real learning will happen.
Looking forward to it.
That's great.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.